Good morning and welcome to Friday's OTB AM. It's just gone at 7:45 on this Friday morning, chilly Friday morning, and we're delighted to have you alongside us, myself and Owen. Good morning to you, Owen.
A very good morning to you, Adrian.
How are you today?
I'm very well. How are you?
A bit bunged up, to be honest with you. I'm a bit been suffering from a little bit of man flu during the week, so a bit bunged up. Also sort of pulled a bit of a muscle in my back yesterday, so a bit moany.
How did that happen?
Innocuously opening a door, which is really what tends to happen to me these days. It's
you opened a door,
yeah,
and you pulled your back.
Yeah, that's what tends to happen.
How big was this door? It was like something in Hogwarts.
House door, yeah, normal sized door. I've managed to do it quite a bit recently. Searching for change in my pocket, got into a toll one day. Back went out.
Wow,
it's no fun.
You need to work on your posture.
It's true. So we've a busy Star Pack show, and I think it's fair enough to say coming up over the next little bit. But one of the things that jumped out at us this morning as we were going across the back pages, like it is the eve of the World Cup, and we're all getting Six Nations, too carried away with ourselves. And Eddie Jones, like just a sort of generally dislikable character, has been at it again with some unbelievable comments about Ireland. It's like this sort of stuff on. I mean, look, building on, like, you know, everybody remembers the scummy Irish stuff from last year. Like, it's just. At some point or another, somebody's going to have to take this guy in hand. Like, these comments are absolutely outrageous. I'll give you a bit of a flavour of them here from the Irish Mail this morning. Jones says stuff like, Ireland are the best side in the world, very well coached and drilled side, and of particular things that they do well in a game. I mean, this is typical Eddie Jones guff. Outrageous commentary. Such a slur.
I'm very, very happy. It's always my favourite day of the year. The new year doesn't kick in until Eddie Jones is in front of a microphone. So yesterday was January 1st for me. My 2019 has finally got up and running, because without Eddie Jones, all of our lives would be significantly more boring. We would care a little bit less about the Six Nations. We'd still care about it, and we'd care a little bit less about playing England the weekend after next. So I'm happy that he's back. I'm happy that he's in front of a microphone, and I will be a sad man the day the RFU decide to get rid of him, or if he walks.
To stuff like, to beat Ireland, we need to compete brutally in all contest areas of the game. Like, these kind of slurs on our nation, I mean, it's up there with Martin Johnson, you know, and the red carpet business, like, really, when you think about it.
Do you think that he actually goes out of his way to be snide and sarcastic? I don't think he does. I think it's just the way he is.
I think there's a bit of the, do you know, like in a far less successful way from Eddie Jones' point of view, there's a little bit of the Alex Ferguson's, Jose Mourinho's about what he says. Like, he says that and everybody kind of says, oh, there's a deep message now and there somewhere. And he could potentially say the exact opposite, and everybody would be saying, oof, he's, you know, the mind games. In fact, that's exactly the essence of the piece, that the mind games have started, even though he's falling over himself to pay compliments to the Irish team. You mentioned January 1st. Like, in some ways, some of his quotes yesterday, it might have been April 1st. He's talking about he may potentially, in a World Cup year, by the way, start to play 9 forwards in a game. So he feels that there's two things to it. One, he might play Jack Noel, who's a back, as a forward, and then as an addition to that, he might well play 9 forwards. I think he's panicking, to be honest with you. Like, results have obviously not gone his way now. They had a decent November series, clearly, but I do think he's panicking. Like, it's World Cup year. If this stuff was any good, he'd have been doing it 2 years ago. He had said he had sampled it at some point with Japan, that he had brought in he'd given a forward a backs jersey, and he played him in a slightly different way, or whatever it was. But I mean, like, that's Japan, who are generally trying to upset one of the larger nations. I think that if he's introducing this, if he's serious about this idea, and it's quite possible that he ain't, but if he is, in a World Cup year, I think he's panicking.
Really?
Yeah.
I fear a massive England backlash this calendar year, whether it comes in the Six Nations or whether it comes in the World Cup. I really do think that we've been very quick to write off the Eddie Jones era, and there is a sting in the tail of his tenure. With good reason, don't get me wrong, with good reason. I do think that they've had their injury troubles over the past couple of years. Like, let's not forget the base they came from going into last year's Six Nations. We were talking about England as an extremely good side, one of the world beaters, looking ahead to 2019, potentially the best chance one of the Six Nations sides had of winning the World Cup. Now, 18 months later, things are looking significantly different. But if you put them between now and September, I think there's enough time for them to get things back together. Dylan Hartley's obviously injured, not in the squad. The two Vunipolas.
Speaking of likeable characters.
Yeah, speaking of likeable characters. Well, that's the thing. Like, there's a lot of dislikable characters in that camp, and quite often dislikable characters are very, very successful sportsmen, and that has proved to be the case quite often with great English rugby teams as well. Like, the two Vunipolas being back, Billy Vunipola being back for England is obviously a humongous asset to them, something that they didn't have in last year's Six Nations, pretty much for all of last year's Six Nations as far as I remember, right? So, the whole face has changed for me, or has the potential to change. I think England, we've got to a stage where we used to hate Eddie Jones because they were successful. Then we went into a stage 12 months ago of laughing at Eddie Jones because he wasn't that much of a threat to us. We're in big danger of continuing that trend of laughing at him, whereas he is still a very, very dangerous man to us. And I think it makes life more interesting.
Yeah, look, it's fair. Life would be a bit more boring without him. I'd be easy with that.
Well, if you're happy with a boring life, then good for you.
I love the way you've made that analogy, or that stretch. So that's the Eddie Jones story. We're going to get into a little bit more on that in just a little bit, and plenty more interesting stuff obviously coming up between now and the end of the show. We've got the sports pages that was having on and going to get stuck into in just a few minutes' time. Plenty to get into there as well. Lots of good stuff across the back pages this morning. We've Jon Walters on the show this morning, and we're really looking forward to that. Off the ball co-commentator Jon Walters, of course, and Gary Breen as well, to preview the weekend's Premier League. And there's plenty of other interesting storylines as well, including all that Bielsa stuff during the week that we'll put to the lads as well. Spying on the Dobbs was a story that will probably ring a bell for some astute viewers this morning who would have been paying attention 7 or 8 years ago when Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent wrote a story about what the Dubs were getting up to in early morning training. So we're going to get the inside scoop from the man who got the scoop, and that's coming your way at just after 8:30. We're going to talk rugby as always with Quinny on a Friday. That's about 10 to 9, and then myself and Owen are going to pick our winners and losers of the week just after 9 o'clock. So that's what's on the agenda. One
man who I'm not sure is going to be in the winners or losers section this week, because he's a bit of a winner and he's had a bit of a loss as well yesterday, is Jerome Quinn, who works for the Higher Education GEA and produces video content for them. He was at the UCD game yesterday, and he was a bit of a loser in terms of one of his equipment, but he was a winner in terms of capturing one of the most satisfying ways you can capture a goal. Here's Conor McCarthy hitting the back of the net. I'm not sure. So there's two ways that you can score an unbelievably satisfying goal. One is that sweet spot off the post where you can hear the clang of the post.
A couple of penalties in the Derby Southampton game during the week that clangered backed off.
Penalties are a beautiful opportunity. Yeah. The second one is this, when you hit the camera and the camera inevitably gets broken. And it's funny from a Premier League perspective, but I think when it's actually kind of closer to home, I hope we can get a new camera basically.
I think a drop kick.
Continue to see these goals.
Most satisfying goal for me is a drop kick.
Oh, well, yeah.
Drop kick back then. You don't really, as a player, I wonder, do you get that satisfaction of hitting the camera? Yeah, half volley, yeah.
Yeah, he did say that in the middle of the game, Conor McCarthy, one of his teammates, had said to him, you've hit the camera there, mate. But he did confirm that he's not going to personally pay for it, but that UCD should sort him out.
Very good. Nice goal. Going to get stuck into the back pages now and let you know what's happening right across these newspapers this morning. We're going to kick off with just a bit of a recap of the Irish Daily Mail that I mentioned a little bit earlier on. Jones, Ireland, the best team in the world, this outrageous slur from Eddie Jones this morning. O'Neill back to Forest Trail. This is the photograph of Martin O'Neill back at Nottingham Forest and aiming to bring Roy Keane with him as well. And Martin fires a warning to make over fixtures by Philip Quinn. This is Martin O'Neill saying that he had picked too many away tough friendlies and for Mick not to do the same. Dublin's Wannabes make O'Byrne Cup poison chalice for Westmeath is the other one of the major stories of this morning that's across the top page there as well. A picture of the new Westmeath manager Jack Cooney on ahead of the O'Byrne Cup final this weekend, and whether Westmeath should go with a full team and get chastened by the Dublin thirds, or actually are they better off just putting on a second or third team and getting beaten anyway.
First team.
I'm 100% on board with that. First team all the way and get the silverware in the bag. The Irish Independent this morning, Bullish Jones says England squad is very capable of beating Ireland. That's Rory O'Connor, who'll be with us a little bit later, not to talk rugby this morning. That's the Irish Independent this morning, and also that shot of Martin O'Neill there. Roy can help make Forest great again. Writes Dan MacDonald, who was over at that opening press conference yesterday. That's the Irish Independent today. The Times Ireland edition, O'Neill, I can adapt to the modern game. This is again just more reflections on that. And Damien Lawler, opposition to the hand pass rule gathers pace. The 3 hand passes and release it rule. I mean, I don't think we can call it the controversial rule just yet, but it's certainly headed in that direction. The Irish Times, meanwhile, this is a squad to beat Ireland. Jones throws down the gauntlet. This is another line out of that Eddie Jones press conference yesterday. That's rugby all the way, of course, in the Irish Times this morning. And then on the Irish Examiner, the price is right, ? GA bosses planning admission hikes for league campaign. That's the Irish Examiner this morning.
Should mention as well that we hope Jerome Quinn's camera gets fixed, because I think they were actually live streaming 8 games across the Electric Ireland, Fitzgibbon and Sigerson Cup.
I presume it was just a GoPro or something, was it?
Yeah, I think so.
150 quid jobby.
Back page of the Herald is Roy still my first choice. Nottingham boss O'Neill talks of his Irish impact at Euro 2016, and now we're enjoying it, says Paul Pogba, speaking about his new experience at Manchester United. Speaking of his old experience at Manchester United, the back of the Sun says, "I'll be back on top," Mourinho's vow after Manchester United flop. Now, Jose Mourinho has a gagging order with Manchester United in terms of not being able to speak about his previous situation there. So he spoke in code, really, on his first game doing the Asian Cup for beIN Sports yesterday. And there was some sort of veiled dig at players who have a little bit too much power in the dressing room. Now, I have no idea who that player could be that might have wielded a bit too much power in the Manchester United dressing room. So thank God for that gagging order. Back page of the Irish Daily Star is no rush and Roy. Keen focus is on Il Dad. And now for glory is Andy Robertson there, who's signed a new 5-year deal at Liverpool. Also as well there on the back of the Star, you've got Marcus Rashford set to double his money in a new Manchester United deal worth €170,000 a week. And that is the lead on the back of the Mirror. Cashford, United set to double strikers' wages to €150k a week to scare off summer bids. You've also got Jamie Vardy there dressed as Spider-Man. There's a spider in the Foxes camp, says the headline there.
I saw that yesterday with a photograph, and it was like, who's this that's turned up to training in Spider-Man suit? I didn't need to even check the name. You just knew who it was straight off the bat.
Really?
Aye, absolutely.
You knew that Jamie Vardy was a jokester of the Leicester camp?
Jokester.
I don't know. Yeah, anyway. Back page of The Guardian is player power. United not ready for modern football, says Jose Mourinho. And then finally, the back page of the Racing Post. Free scoring Canaries can keep hitting the high notes. It's Norwich against Birmingham. It's in the Championship and it kicks off at 7:45 this evening.
All right, good stuff. Thanks for that. For the minute home, we're going to get to Jon Walters very shortly. We're going to chat to him, potentially get a bit of an injury update for him, and talk to him in a little bit more detail about that Bielsa stuff. He's some interesting stuff to say on that, and a few more bits and bobs as well. So plenty to come, as I mentioned. We've Alan Quinlan as well joining us a little later in the show. We're going to preview all the weekend's rugby. Rory O'Connor is going to be here to tell us about his own Spygate that happened recently enough. But before all of that, we're going to hear from John Giles. He was, as always, on Thursday nights off the ball. He was chatting to Nathan Murphy last night. Here he is on Declan Rice, of course, reckoning that he is like one particular former United player.
I'd pay 50 million for him now, because I'm thinking 4 or 5 years' time he's going to be worth double that. He's just a top-class player. That if we can get him would be absolutely fantastic. And hope we do get him. And we've got Redmond mentioned in it. And I think what Mick is doing very well, he seems to be getting around players that we didn't go for before. Like, he seems to know Redmond. I never heard of Redmond being any way associated with us.
Yeah, his mother was
saw him coming on last night. Did you see him in the match?
Yeah, scored a great goal.
Very good. Wouldn't he be great for us?
Yeah.
We had Redmond and
well, it changes the entire outlook for probably the next 5-10 years if Declan Rice declares for Ireland.
Oh, definitely. No, I'd go for him. I think if you say he's worth 50 million now, I think in 2 or 3 years' time he can only get better and be worth more. I think he's a terrific prospect. Well, he's more than a prospect now. I think he's a real player. He's very young. He's mobile. He's big. He can tackle. He can score a goal. He do all the things that midfield players want to do.
Yeah, that was John Giles from last night's show talking about the value that he'd have on Declan Rice, and there's plenty more, including comparisons with the former United great. If you check out that full piece up on our YouTube channel, it's kind of the story that keeps on giving on, isn't it? That Declan Rice story. It's just like every single day there seems to be something new about it. Like, come on, Declan, tell us what's happening.
Declan Rice is a John Giles dream. Like, if John Giles could mould a footballer, it would probably be Declan Rice, because he does things at both ends of the pitch, as he kind of alluded to there. Midfielders are supposed to be present at both ends of the pitch, according to the John Giles school of thought, and there's some value in that. I mean, you certainly get a bit more bang for your buck from a player if you can do things at both ends of the pitch. And I'd imagine Giles watching him on Saturday against Arsenal, intercepting the ball on his own box and scoring at the other ends of the pitch, and probably could have scored twice. He really should have had a goal in the first half as well in that encounter. Probably just brings a smile to his face. It's a classic midfielder, a bit of an old school player, but also the type of guy who seems to have a bit of an old school mentality. Like, I haven't seen a debutant as happy while scoring a Premier League goal in a long time. And I know there's a bit more scrutiny because we're looking at Declan Rice and every little thing he does.
No, you're right. The smiles in the post-match.
It seems above and beyond any other debut smile and happiness that we've seen over the last
few years. It makes it more
years.
difficult for him to eventually leave the club, which inevitably he will do when, like John is saying, somebody comes in with 50 million quid. Like, it does make it more difficult because the fans are watching exactly what you're watching and saying, Jesus, this guy's one of us. And
well, that's the thing. That it also shows that he does have the capacity for a huge amount of emotional attachment to something. Now, he kissed his badge while playing for Ireland, which suggests to me that there was some sort of emotional attachment, which is why I suspect this thing is taking so long.
Martin O'Neill has held his first press conference, as we've been mentioning, as the new Nottingham Forest manager. He's eyeing promotion, writes Philip Quinn here on the back page of the Irish Daily Mail, and it's generally the theme that's carried across most of the papers. It's another story that's definitely going to keep on giving. There was a whole bunch of Irish journalists clearly over at the press conference yesterday. He's telling Mick McCarthy, like, the main Irish line out of it was, Mick, avoid tough away friendlies, which actually felt a little bit disappointing. I kind of thought there was going to be a bit more needle, or there was going to be something else for us to get our teeth stuck into. There's every chance that he goes here, and on the basis of the stinging that he's picked up at this side of the water, is so determined to make a success of this thing that himself and, I mean, the team that he has around him, Steve Guppy and Seamus McDonough and Roy Keane, who it seems like is going to come in with him at some point, actually do end up making a success of this thing. He gets them promoted to the Premier League, and suddenly we're all left looking like mugs.
I'm not sure we'll be left looking like mugs. The phrase that we often hear about a new manager coming into a club is that, the players will get a new lease of life, they'll be refreshed, a new voice in the dressing room, etc., etc. I do wonder if that can actually work in the opposite manner, that a manager can be refreshed by a new bunch of players, which obviously Martin O'Neill is going to get now, but also on a continuous level, that you don't have that in international football. You're stuck by international laws, you're stuck by whoever's Irish or whoever has an Irish relative. Whereas, and like, this is something that he's always spoken about, or had always spoken about as Ireland manager, that we don't have the players. Like, Martin O'Neill having transfer windows at his disposal as a manager, it's a very obvious thing to point out, but it might actually lead to a happier Martin O'Neill. A refreshing of the squad every few months, every year at worst, might actually lead to a more refreshed, rejuvenated Martin O'Neill, and also it'll take away this ability for him to say, well, my players aren't very good.
And also he can get rid of the people who are, saying overtly, we don't like your methods. Like, it's a bit, like you're saying, a bit more of a difficult thing to do, to squeeze people out at an international level. It can be done, but in that instance it's just a very cold, you're not having my methods, where you're on the transfer market, good luck to you.
Yeah, totally. If you've got that much of a belief and it's that staunch, like Martin O'Neill clearly seems to be, Jose Mourinho is another one, you do need a bit of autonomy in the transfer window to bring in people that share your school of thought, or that are kind of like a piece of plasticine that you can mould into thinking your way. And obviously Jose Mourinho didn't have that at the end of the last transfer window, which led to a lot of tensions there at Old Trafford. And I don't think the way Martin O'Neill thinks is actually too dissimilar to that.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's we're going to see how that pans out over the next while. It's going to be fascinating for us anyway. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And if Roy ends up doing sort of taking half the press conferences that he took when he was there by this time of Ireland, I kind of suspect that he won't. Like, I think at club management it's less acceptable. I mean, actually, maybe in international management, the point is also stands that it's less acceptable to put your assistant manager out to do the media duties. Yeah, well, it's just a different process, isn't it? At international level, there's like press almost every day, and you put up a different player every day, and switching up the coaching team is no bad thing. So I think, as you say, it's a bit more the norm in international football. Rarely would you expect to see it at club football, unless, say, Martin O'Neill gets a touchline ban, and it's up to Roy Keane to speak to Sky after the game. Yeah. But if one of those two players is going to get a touchline ban, or one of those two managers is going to get a touchline ban, I wonder, is Martin O'Neill the more likely? It's a huge moment as well for Roy Keane. This thing that he's clearly invested his stocks in Martin O'Neill at this point, and he's going down with him if this goes badly, and he's going up with him if it goes very, very well, and that will rise his stock once again if it does go well for Martin O'Neill. So he's kind of attached himself to Martin O'Neill at this point, and there's no getting away from that fact, ultimately, once he does come on board with Nottingham Forest. So that is one of the really interesting layers about this, is how Roy Keane gets on in this particular role, and what happens to him after this. I wonder how many O'Neill clearly touches on Keane over the course of the press conference. He says, he's tough to handle, and that's one of the messages that comes out. He says it in the Martin O'Neill type way, that he's tough to handle, but actually, like, why wouldn't you want him on board, sort of thing, that we couldn't have had the success that we had, obviously, at times with the Republic of Ireland when he was there. But I wonder how many offers have come in for Roy Keane over the last while. I think some of the delay that seems to be around his inclusion at Nottingham Forest seems to be around family illness that he has, that's written about in one of the newspapers today. So I'm sure that's all that's really delaying it. But I wonder what offers were in for Keane, you know, like is he looking at this as a Jesus, there's not much else on the table here, and this is sort of what's it, you know, for me at the minute. I mean, it's not a bad gig for him because it's same dynamic as the Ireland thing he's in. The spotlight is not directly on him unless he's causing a little bit of stir in the background. But yeah, I wonder how many sort of other clubs were in for Roy Keane as club manager.
Yeah, I do wonder if Roy Keane... Like I genuinely believe when Roy Keane went in as assistant manager to Martin O'Neill that he saw it as some sort of apprenticeship, that he went in there to learn under Martin O'Neill, who at the time would have been hugely respected. I think the respectability has taken a bit of a dent, but he's still hugely respected in some quarters in the United Kingdom. So I don't think it's a shock appointment. But from a Roy Keane perspective, I do wonder if he felt that apprenticeship wasn't as productive as it could have been with the Republic of Ireland, that really he felt, I need to actually serve an apprenticeship in club football and actually be an assistant manager to Martin O'Neill and see how he operates in a club. It's a bit more intense, it's a bit more high octane, a lot more games and a lot more player turnover.
Apprenticeships probably Keane, doesn't he? Like he's obviously had the big gig at plenty of clubs and is well able for it by all accounts, but I mean...
But this is the point though, isn't it, that he had the big gigs and he felt that he needed to learn a bit more without the pressure of being in a big gig, because ultimately after Ipswich Town, where do you go? You go to a lower rung of the Championship. If that goes badly for you, you're relegated and you're a League One manager. Like, that was a tightrope to walk at that point. And I think it did take a parking of some sort of ego to actually go in and say, I'm happy to be an assistant manager for a while. And I think fair play to him. The thing is now, has this assistant managership gone on a little bit too long? Well, there is going to be a lot of retrospective analysis of this decision, depending on what way it goes. Like, we will be saying if they get promoted next season, oh, that was a genius move by Roy Keane to stick with Martin O'Neill. If it goes the other way, you're like, what's he doing?
Yeah, and also, like, inevitably what's going to happen in 6 months' time or a year's time is that everybody's going to be writing that, you know, Martin O'Neill is sort of considering his options. He may step away from Nottingham Forest at some point in the next year, and, well, you assume when that happens that Roy Keane is the next man standing and he's the one who's going to get the gig.
Very, very similar to another story I've heard.
Yeah, so we'll see how that plays out over the next little bit. That other story that caught my eye from Michael Clifford in the Irish Daily Mail this morning was just in relation to that Westmeath story at the weekend. So they're playing Dublin. It was a game I was kind of half considering heading along to. I think it's on Sunday night at Parnell Park, and it's the development, obviously, a whole bunch of young dubs, and Westmeath's opportunity to get some silverware on very early in the season was quite tempting for me. I mean, there is the risk that Westmeath's absolute first team goes out and gets tanked here by a bunch of kids that nobody's going to see for the rest of the year. Pretty demoralising if it happens that way, it has to be said. But I think you have to go for it. Like, there was Michael Clifford recounts a story of a recent O'Byrne Cup final where a manager was leaving the ground and off the record was talking to journalists on the way out, and the journalist was saying, like, why didn't you put your full team? And like, they were beaten by Dublin thirds or whatever, and give them a bit of a rattle. And he was like, you joke with me, put out my first team and get beaten by them anyway. Why would I do that? Like, it feels like such a bloody defeatist attitude to begin with, doesn't it?
100%, given last week Meath took them to a penalty shootout. So I don't see any reason why Westmeath wouldn't put out their first team this weekend. It just makes absolutely no sense to me. You want to get every crack possible at this Dublin, not this Dublin team, because this is not going to be the Dublin team. I don't think we're going to see none of these kids this summer. I think 2 or 3 of them may actually may appear as subs or may appear in the meaningless last Super 8 game they have, or whatever it may be. So there is future talent in this Dublin team, and there is outstanding footballers in this. It is a brilliant opportunity for any team like Westmeath to just go up against the blue jersey of Dublin. And I
think the two top teams in Leinster, you know, I make that point that over the last number of years.
I was going to say, is there some sort of regret that Westmeath have actually not been able to not close the gap, because the gap is just, you can't measure that
fully
gap.
fulfil their potential of.
Well, they were so they got to, what was it, 2-3 Leinster finals in a row a couple of years ago.
2000, yeah. More recently, yeah.
Like the year the Meath come back, and then the following year. So what are we talking here? 15, 16? Like, is there some sort of regret that they didn't solidify that position and push on a little bit? Like, there was a decent age profile in that team in certain positions that they could have perhaps got into Division 2 and become a solid Division 2 team.
Definitely.
And that hasn't happened.
And some players have fallen away. So part of the difficulty that through injury or retirement or whatever it was, some players sort of fell off.
But the reason why I think that happens is it's actually such a disadvantage. This may seem like the most obvious point in the world, being in the Leinster Championship, and like, of course, with
fair point.
It is a fair point. But that this idea, having this behemoth on your doorstep, is just such a demoralising thing that if they were in any other provincial championship, they're like, okay, let's chip away at the league and let's solidify ourselves, as I say, in Division 2 and get to a level like, say, Clare have got to, or that Tipperary have got to, by virtue of the fact really that they're in a provincial championship where they have hope, where they feel like beating Cork if they get that draw actually provides that bit of hope every year.
Part of the difficulty was it was a false hope because the rest of Leinster was so shit. Like you do have the likes of Kildare obviously not getting into the Super 8s, which I mean any Leinster team getting into the Super 8s beyond Dublin is a good thing. It could only be a good thing for the province, but the difficulty was it was so bad for that number of years that actually there was no great success in being the second best team in Leinster, and anyway, getting hockey by Dublin one way or the other was just all pretty. I sat through a lot of those games at Croke Park, and they were generally quite grim. Like there's no great pleasure to be taken from it, and I'm sure there's another story today about a lot of the gates being down around the Leinster Championship games, and I'm sure that's part of the reason for it. The guts of £1 million, I think, by all accounts. Right, we do have Jon Walters upcoming very shortly. We're going to speak to him about various topics. So if you have any questions for Jon, get them into us over the next few minutes. We'll put them to him. But before that, we're going to hear from the Republic of Ireland team doctor, Alan Byrne, who gave a rare appearance in front of the camera last night. He joined Kevin and Nathan on the football show. Loads of really interesting stuff. You can check out the full piece up on our YouTube channel. Here's a short story, a remarkable story by Shane Duffy.
It was a free kick, and the keeper, I think, came out with both legs up as his style, and it looked like it was hard to see from the sideline. But I remember when I looked back in the video, Kieran Murray went onto the pitch first, and if you check, if you watch, if you count, he makes a decision at about 11 seconds to go like this to me. But I know now we're so onto the pitch. Within about the same time frame, I turn around and say, I can't tell you why I knew. Darren O'D, and this is no disrespect, Darren walked by, he said, don't mind him, Doc, he's just winded. That's, I swear to God, that's as Darren might say, because it looked
Darren O'D just tweeted us tonight, by the way, to tell you,
did he?
Yeah, that you're the best doc around, so I would say
sorry about that, Darren.
I would say that, yeah.
No, he didn't.
He says what footballers say.
It was a typical thing, and to be honest with you, that was, if you're asking, looking back on that, because Shane nearly died, and without John O'Byrne's decision making in the ambulance, and without the matter and all of that, Jerry McEntee, who did the surgery, he would have died. I mean, he bled 3.5 litres into his abdomen. One of the weirdest parts of that night was the manager had given us the night off, and I was meeting my wife with one of the kitmen, Mick Lawler, and his wife, go out for dinner. I said, I can't go, I've got to go to the matter. So when they found where the problem was, they were going to operate, and I was with Shane's dad, if I remember correctly, his uncle, his nephew, Pat Costello, who's the head of FAI operations, I think, at that stage, myself and John O'Byrne. And we're in Phibsborough, and I'm trying to think what we do. So this is ridiculous. We went to Eddie Rockets to have a cup of tea because I didn't know where else to go. So we're sitting there in the booth, and John O'Byrne gets a phone call after about 20 odd minutes, and he goes out, and we can see him walking up, and he comes in, and you know when somebody's walking, and as he got closer, I wasn't sure what he was going to say. He said, they found everything is fine, they've stopped the bleeding, Shane is fine. And we ran out of the Eddie Rockets, jumping around like, Shane's father said to me, Alan, it's like winning the World Cup. And I said, Brian, I think Brian is, I said, it's Brendan, I said, it's much bigger than that.
Republic of Ireland team doctor Alan Byrne on with the show, the lads on the show last night. You can check out the full piece up on our YouTube channel. Well worth checking out there. An interesting chat with Alan Byrne. Delighted to say Jon Walters joins us on the line en route, I think, John, to Burnley training. Good morning to you.
Morning, guys. You okay?
Good. What does Burnley training consist for you these days? How's the injury?
I'm not too bad. I'm in the gym probably 6 days a week doing ski machine, mountain bike, pull-ups, all that. And I just started a couple of weeks doing Achilles and calf work. And I think the next step's going on the Alta G treadmill, which is the anti-gravity treadmill, and then out on the grass hopefully after that.
All right, well look, it's funny watching the, I don't know if you've seen it, the Sunderland documentary that we seem to talk about almost every other day now, but it gave a good insight into various players, some Irish players indeed, who had been out for long spells with injuries, and how monotonous it could be, I suppose, to a degree, with having to sort of repeat that rehab in a way that, you know, it's not like going to training and hanging out with the lads every day.
No, look, you have to get your head around it very quickly. I did. I got my head around it as well as walking off the pitch, and it switches you exactly what I've done. And you've got to get your head. It's going to be a long slog, a long road, and just deal with it. And you know, I mentally dealt with it, and it just and took it with the viewpoint what's to be, and there's nothing you can do about it, absolutely nothing you can do about it. So get your head around it and set yourself little challenges and just enjoy what you're doing. You can't be out there training, you watch them train, you watch the lads go out, you sort of side of it, you're not part of it really, but you try to be as much as you can.
Has the fact that it's been a fairly tricky first half of the season for Burnley made it easier or harder for you as an injured player?
I think sometimes it's some lads in the change room. I like to speak to a few lads, especially if they're not playing, and help them in a certain way and speak to them and do what you can for them. And pass your experience off, and sometimes the lads that are playing, like, it'll turn around and it's not all doom and gloom, and you just got to, especially the big clubs away when you're playing those. If you're on a bad run of 3 or 4 games, you just got to turn it around quickly. It's trying to do that, and that's the manager's job as well, and the coaching staff. And we had a tough start to the season, but we've hit back and we've won 3 on the run now, which is very hard in the Premier League. It's hard enough to get back-to-back wins, to get 3 on the run going into Watford away. Got a good chance to get 4, so it's good times at the moment. But I think we've got to go on some run to get out the trouble we're in. So I think we're going to be there or thereabouts for the next at least few months, and see what happens.
Yeah, it's definitely been an encouraging start to the calendar year, and an encouraging weekend last weekend from an Irish perspective as well. I thought Jeff Hendrick should have been given that goal, but even if you don't give it to him, I think he had a very, very good performance last week. His form seems to be picking up recently. I presume his form off the pitch and his own morale is picking up as well.
Oh, Jeff's always in good spirits, to be fair. Jeff's a great lad. He's always in good spirits. Doesn't seem to get too down. It's difficult for him, especially at Burnley, because he plays in a position that is not really his position for what he's grown up playing. He plays in behind the striker. I say Jeff's a natural midfielder, but probably not a 10 times the same way behind the striker, because you expect him to get beyond the striker and make those channel runs, and that's not really what Jeff's about so much. You get Jeff on the ball, his footwork's very good, he's good at linking up and controlling that midfield. So sometimes he's judged on that, playing, because he's playing week in, week out, and he doesn't get so much of the ball in our team. So it's good to see him doing well, and good to see him, it wasn't given to him, but it's good to see him involved in the goals, definitely.
And good to see him wishing Robbie Brady on a happy birthday on Twitter during the week as well, when he felt the FAI were leaving him out. One of the other things, John, that was certainly caught my interest on Twitter, and in terms of the Bielsa storyline that's kind of dominated a lot of the headlines of football this week, I think the best thing about it had been seeing Jon Walters quoting Oscar Wilde and Roy Keane in the space of a couple of days in response to various questions on the topic. Morality, like art, means drawing a line somewhere, and of course the famous fail to prepare to fail line. Do you think that line was drawn a little harshly on Marcelo Bielsa this week? Yeah,
I do. I think he's not broken any rule. He's not. He's trying to find small margins, and he's doing an unbelievable amount of work behind the scenes. He's shown his press conference, and that goes on at all clubs, all the stats. You have stats guys, and we watch games, but I think that's a different level what he does, and that's just probably for maybe an instance in a game, for a corner or a scenario in a game. That's a very, very small percentage you go through that work. Now, at Stoke, we had a training ground, and the fans used to just park up at the car park in the gym and watch the training. Or you could walk around the footpath, which a lot did, and watch the training through the trees. So I always saw teams could quite easily just watch the training. There's nothing wrong with it. You're a public footpath. So where are the morals drawn, I think, in a football club? Because I think the English media in particular jumped on it, and then you talk about the English media's morals of how they clamber to get the England team and print it to the detriment probably of the English team throughout every tournament and every game, and yeah, they're the ones that I call and shouting the loudest, saying what he's done is wrong and cheating. And then the morals of a football club in general, where do you draw the line? Where do you start and stop? Do you start it when you when you're saying something like that and he hasn't broken the rule, or do you start it when you're trying to sign a player and you talk to a player that you're not allowed to talk to? Because it goes on at every club. Every single club will do it. So where's the line drawn in terms of morals? And there's lots of other things in the game. What if Frank Lampard's striker dived in the penalty area last game of the season to get him promoted, won a penalty, scored the penalty, and he got promoted? Would he be shouting that his player's cheating because he's been promoted? I don't think so. So it's where you draw the lines of football. I don't think what he's done is wrong.
Yeah,
I think what he's done is very clever.
Just in terms of the reaction and what we've seen written and what we've seen said in the media over the last week, do you think that there's been sort of a snobbery almost from some of the pundits in the newspapers? I think, like, just reading Martin Keown yesterday, he seemed particularly outraged by this, that there is some sort of British superiority complex when it comes to viewing an Argentinian manager coming into the championship and doing something like this?
I don't know. I don't know. Possibly. I think I said people don't like it when people are successful. I said that, and people like to take an agenda and why. Maybe they don't understand why, or I don't know. But possibly you could say that, and it's different with say like the Frank Lampard, because he's been part of the golden generation of England players and gets on well with the media, very well spoken, good manager as well. Say what's fair and what's not in football. There's another one who Frank Lampard probably get players from Chelsea and other clubs because it's Frank Lampard, where he might not go to a Rotherham, say in the same league. Is that fair? Because it's a difficult one to say, and that's what I say. There's no point in getting on your moral high horse and saying, "Oh, this is wrong, this is that," because every football club, there's things that go on that aren't in the rules. And in games, there's things that you do that aren't in the rules, but it's part of the game. So you just get on with it and actually say fair play. He's come out and said it as well, which I thought was great. But his translator came out and said it. Who knows what he said? He could have been saying something else. His translator came out and said it. So I think it's fair play to him.
Yeah, saw Dean Saunders, one of those, be up on his high horse during the week as well. A man who himself obviously had some questionable things to say about Brian Clough in the past. But look, there we go. Gary Breen joins us on the line as well. Morning to you, Gary. Is this, I presume it's this sort of stuff, you'd have seen it in your day?
Good morning. Listen, in keeping with what John said there, he's absolutely right. This talk about a moral code among managers is nonsense, really, because each manager will do everything they possibly can to get an advantage. Managers will know the team from the opposition going into weekend just by talking to an agent who's got a disgruntled player who will reveal it. He'll have one of his players who has mates with one of those in their change room, and he'll reveal it and he'll work along with it. So it's very difficult to suddenly start talking about morality, bearing in mind just how ruthless managers can be, and players as well. Of course they can, and club hierarchies in terms of doing whatever they can for their own benefit. I think ultimately it's more about etiquette. And Owen, you said about Martin Keown saying about, they don't do this in the Premier League. Well, you're right. I think a lot of people in the Premier League believe that they're above the rest of the world. The criticism that Pep Guardiola got in his first season, people saying you can't win the Premier League playing that type of football, it's a lack of respect. It's complete nonsense. I think Bielsa, in keeping with what Johnny's just said there, did an incredible job to be top of the championship with largely a squad that he inherited. This is not a case of him coming in and bringing all these star players in the way that Wolves did in terms of coming up last year. He just rejuvenated that whole squad, and I think it's very difficult. People need to be careful in terms of throwing accusations out.
Just before we leave this topic, Gary, one final thought from me was that if this guy hadn't been on the radar of some of the bigger clubs, and you've mentioned some of them there at the top end of the Premier League, perhaps he most likely is now, given the week that he's had, a forceful personality, this scientific approach to it, a guy who can get results, is surely now getting attention from some of the bigger clubs.
Well, if those bigger clubs hadn't known about his skill set, that's a nonsense, really, because he's been admired. All these new generation of managers keep citing that he's their inspiration as such in terms of what they've learned under him. But also, I'd counter that by saying all the things and everyone talking about a masterclass. It's not things that people are not doing anyway. You know, people are doing a lot of this work behind the scenes. It's probably the supporters are not aware just how much detail goes into it. You have to do everything possible to make sure that you're fully prepared. Now, when I was coaching at Peterborough, one of my main remits was dealing with defensive corners. So I'd watched countless hours of the opposition in terms of their corners, just to see whether or not they'd done something we hadn't seen. I'd work on a training field then to counter that, how we were potentially vulnerable. I'd work on scenarios like that. So you do it, and our coaches are doing it all the time. So as much as people say how brilliant that was to see what he had done, it is actually been doing quite commonly throughout the leagues.
I want to talk a little bit about the United-Brighton game, obviously the weekend, and the incredible run, John, that United are on at the minute, that Solskjaer is on, and he's making it very difficult, obviously, for the United bosses not to appoint him almost at this stage. And if he continues the way he's going, John, they're going to nick a top 4 spot here. Can you see that happening, and do you expect Solskjaer to get the gig in the long run?
Well, I think he's done an excellent job so far, and I think it's obviously a good team anyway. I think it's just getting the confidence in the squad and rejuvenating them after Jose. So, you know, he started better than any other manager in history. So it'd be difficult if he carried on like that not to. But it's a case of, you know, especially if you've got a Champions League spot, because after the clubs worth a lot. And realistically, if you look at it, Manchester United is a business now. So when they make decisions, it's a business decision as well, not just a footballing one, because the stock price goes up and things like that. And whether they've got, I'll be very, very surprised if Manchester United haven't got stuff and weren't speaking to someone anyway, whether that be Zinedine Zidane or I don't know who else has been mentioned, whether that's lined up, and that's lined up for the summer anyway. I'm not too sure. And you know, as you say, in football clubs, there's a lot of things you don't know that what goes on. And being a business, he would have, you know, calculated every decision on it. But if he carries on going the way he's going, it'll be very difficult to not at least give him a go of it. I think they've got to do well in the Champions League as well. But saying that from the players, it's all and well sometimes playing differently for a manager. When a new manager comes in, she's just trying to impress. In that first month, everyone's running that little bit harder and trying a little bit more in training, doing all the right things. Seen it at clubs down the years, that little bounce effect of the new manager coming in. But it's the second month, it's the third month. You need to get those players doing the same things, carrying on and going forward. Because you see it where players do it for the first month and then go back to their old habits and be a bit sloppy or be a bit. So I don't know, but you know, he's done an unbelievable job since he's gone in, so it'll be very difficult not to.
Yeah. All right, John, listen, you've been great with your time this morning. Thanks a million for taking the call. Best of luck with the continuing rehab.
Oh, cheers, thank you. And a little mention for Alan Byrne you had on last night. What a guy he is. Unbelievable from the moment.
Seems like there's so many good stories coming in about him, John. There was a few players in touch last night as well.
Yeah, look, at the moment I was involved in the Irish squad, one of the nicest guys you'll meet. And it's purely just to look after as a person as well. He looks after you so well. He's an unbelievable guy.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Well said. Thanks a million.
Cheers, no problem.
Cheers. Jon Walters on the line there on his way to Burnley training. Just to continue on that theme, Gary, the Brighton United game and like the job that Chris Hughton is doing. Sometimes I think we don't really. I mean, he tends to get an understated credit almost at times. I mean, it struck me during the week that when you look at Wagner getting the sack at Huddersfield, and the two of them would have come into their respective jobs with their clubs in relatively similar positions at the wrong end of the championship. The success of the job that he's doing, I mean, there's no conversation really about Brighton being anywhere near the relegation positions this season. He's gone about his business quite quietly, but really doing an unbelievable job.
But he always does. He's a fabulous manager, and too often it's aimed at him that nice guys finish last as such. And it's something that people are probably saying about Solskjaer as well, that these, just because they've got a nice personality, nice way about them, they lack a bit of steel. Well, having worked under Chris Hughton with the Irish team, I can continue, he certainly has that. And you can't be as successful as he is being without it. He's very astute. Had a great grounding in terms of how long he was a coach before he took the opportunity to make that step up and be a number one. But since he did that, he hasn't looked back. And it's not only a job he done at Brighton, done a sensational job at Newcastle as well. So it doesn't surprise me one bit. He's a brilliant manager.
It's interesting actually that you spoke about defensive coaching there a moment ago, because I often wonder, looking at this exact fixture, Manchester United against Brighton, in their current status, if it is an example of excellent defensive coaching. That obviously Duff and Dunk are two excellent football players, but it seems that they've been coached to maximise their potential as well as a partnership. And I do wonder if we're seeing the early signs of very encouraging defensive coaching from a Manchester United perspective as well. Like, look at the performances of Victor Lindelof under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer so far.
No, listen, in terms of Brighton, I think what Chris does is he assesses what he's got with those players. He obviously brought in Shane Duffy to go alongside Dunk, and they work hard. They don't give up much space behind because they're not the quickest on the turn. We've seen that. So he makes them defend deep. The fullbacks stay narrow. Midfield two in front work ever so hard. The whole team does. I think you don't play for Chris Hughton if you don't. So that's why you see how organised they are and how much work's done on a training field. On the flip side then of Solskjaer, I disagree with you. I think they got ripped to pieces against Tottenham, and everyone talks about this passing of the test, which he done brilliantly, Ole Solskjaer, in terms of tactically so astute, playing split strikers, which obviously then exposes Tottenham's fullbacks, and they work to perfection. But you can't look at that game and say, wow, that was an incredible performance from front to back, because Tottenham, goalkeeper De Gea had to make 11 saves. So there's a lot of work still to be done. Don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot of those Manchester United players, the likes of Pogba, the likes of Rashford, Martial now, who are now showing that they are capable of being Manchester United players. But the flip side also is there's a lot still in that squad who are not good enough, despite contributing, as you rightly said right now, the likes of Herrera, Lindelof as well has improved. But I don't see them getting United back to being title winners.
I did want to ask you a little bit about the Arsenal-Chelsea fixture this weekend, because it has been a relatively interesting couple of weeks from both clubs' perspective. Obviously, Arsenal not willing to pay Aaron Ramsey's wage was a little bit of a warning sign, I think, from a few Arsenal fans' perspective. That being said, it looks like he's going to get 300k a week at Juventus, which is absolutely outrageous. It looks like they're going to try and get most of Mesut Ozil's wages off the books as well. Whereas on the flip side, Chelsea, now they don't want to pay Gonzalo Higuain what he wants, but they're still going to give him something. They're still going to put out a fairly significant outlay, you'd imagine, to get him on loan if that goes through. And also the fact that they've signed Christian Pulisic a couple of weeks ago. We thought that perhaps the gap was closing between Arsenal and the rest of the big six clubs, where the financial muscle wouldn't outweigh them too much. But it seems it's reverting back to the instant post-Emirates construction days. Or am I exaggerating there a small bit, Gary?
No, I think you're right. And the worrying thing for me ultimately was the recruitment in terms of the behind the scenes, in terms of the likes of Mislintat coming in, who was a guy who has a fabulous reputation for finding these players, unearthing the next generation of stars. His name is Diamond Eye in Germany, but now he's being caught by Bayern Munich. That something's not quite right there, that he's not settled. He's going to look to leave. And the massive concern is that if Arsenal can't compete, then why are they allowing millions and millions to go out of the building? They've seen, and it's not just Ramsey, it's not just him going. We've seen it with the fact the likes of Ozil was allowed to drop his contract down to a year to go, and then was able to renegotiate an incredible deal. Sanchez then went off, but we've seen it with Oxlade-Chamberlain, we've seen it with Walcott, and this is what frustrates me so much, is that Arsenal should know better, bearing in mind that they were the architects of what I still believe is the most sensational Premier League transfer of all time, in terms of Sol Campbell going on a free transfer from Tottenham to Arsenal. So the lesson should have been learned, and for them to allow millions to go out of the building like that is a real poor indication of what Gazidis has done. And then obviously trying to replace Wenger, I think it's been a brilliant acquisition in terms of getting Emery, but then Gazidis then leaves for AC Milan, and you just think he's just literally left Arsenal high and dry. And this is the massive concern, is that financially now they can't compete. They're talking about just getting loans in. There's suggestions that Suarez will come in from Barcelona. I know he's worked with Emery before, so that bodes well as such, but there's no doubt it's all well and good getting these offensive players, but it's defensive reinforcements that Arsenal need. And the only thing I can counter it by saying is that hopefully they're not prepared to waste money, which can often happen in January, that they're stockpiling their money to make a real good go of it in the summer transfer window. But certainly there's a financial gulf again with Arsenal not being able to compete with the top teams, despite, as all those Arsenal fans were told, that when they get to the Emirates, they'll be one of the leaders again.
Yeah, given the points gap between them as well, it's absolutely essential that Arsenal get the win at the weekend. Gary, pleasure as always. Thanks a million.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot. In that battle for fourth of course, the live game and Off the Ball this Sunday, Huddersfield against Manchester City. Stephen Doyle and Kevin Kilban going to be on commentary duty for that, and also there's live commentary of the Rugby Wasps against Leinster on Sunday. Conor Morris, Brendan Mackin and Jake Heenan going to be in the commentary box for that one. So that's what's coming up on Off the Ball over the weekend. Your Arsenal going to get it done? Owen?
Probably not. Probably not. Like it is. the sort of fixture Arsenal would win, isn't it? That's the
Yeah, well, that's true.
All the cliches of the peak Arsenal banter era are coming back. They're coming home to roost over the past couple of weeks. We've got our Arsenal back, is now being taken on to its actual conclusion, which is, Arsenal of 3-4 years ago was finally
Must be horrific being an Arsenal fan, because you thought that you did have your Arsenal back and that Emery was the second coming of Wenger the first, and now you're still like...
Well, I have my doubts that it's actually Unai Emery's fault.
Right.
To this extent.
Deeper problems,
as he said, Gazidis just jumped ship after hiring him. Something is not right there.
Alrighty, Darren Cleary is on the way to bring us up to speed with everything that's happening in the world of live sport this morning, and there is plenty of live sport to update you on, so that's coming your way. Alan Quinlan as well will be with us to preview the weekend's rugby. Rory O'Connor's in studio shortly to give us his insight on the spying scoop of the decade, as I've dubbed it this morning aptly. But before we get to one of the greatest yarns in Irish sports spying history, here's Liam Lawrence telling tales of Tony Pulis spying on the Keith Andrews show yesterday.
Before you go, I just want to ask you about the scandal at Leeds, Mr. Bielsa. What were your thoughts on that?
Mate, to be fair to him, it's a breath of fresh air that he's just come out so openly and honest and said, yeah, I did it, so what? But it's obviously upset Lampard and a few other people, but it's been going on for years. You know yourself, other managers know the other team. Sometimes on a Friday, players speak to their mates and things get out and get leaked, but to send someone to the training ground and hide in the trees, it's a new one for me, that.
I don't think Tony Pulis even did that, did he?
We once had someone trying to watch us at an away game. We were, I think it was a Tuesday, and we'd gone on a Tuesday morning out onto a pitch at a hotel to do some shape, and there was some people watching. So Pulis stopped the session, sent two of the coaches over, and these people wouldn't leave. So he storms over and sort of gives them a bit of stick, and then they soon left.
Yeah, somebody got nabbed while spying in Stoke City and had Tony Pulis to deal with. Not a set of circumstances I'd like to be in the middle of. Rory O'Connor, good morning to you.
Morning, Adrian.
You were not quite, but almost in that scenario. Will you set the scene for us? It's 2011, I think it's January, February?
January 2011. All the buzz in the GA and sporting world was around these Dublin early morning training sessions that Pat Gilroy put on. Dublin, obviously, 16 years since they won an All-Ireland. Very different picture than now.
Been to the semi-finals the year previous.
Yeah, beaten by Cork. And this was the big change that they put in, and everyone was talking about it. From what I recall, someone had gone down, a photographer had gone down and taken pictures. So the pictures, they didn't have pictures of the training, but they needed some copy to go with it. And someone had, I can't remember who it was, had the bright idea, why don't we send someone down and just watch? Because they trained on Alfie Byrne Road. I don't think they're there anymore, which is open. anyone who drives through Clontarf can see Alfie Byrne Road. It's a wide open space. So I was the newest man in, probably the least well known of anyone on the staff, and probably the most naive and gullible to be taught. So, and also my parents lived not too far away, so they had the idea of, why don't we send the new guy.
So what happens? The editor calls you in and is like, listen,
I have an idea. Yeah. And I probably wasn't as aware of the access stuff that we kind of anyone who goes to press conferences and stuff in journalism now knows that these are things, there are parameters you're supposed to go. I was just, why not? So I was, the idea was, go down, just have a look and report on what they do, because it was are they flogging them? Is it just, they had this mystique, I think, and the idea was to break the mystique, and the fact that they had January's a quiet time for GA anyway. We had the pictures were good. And why not? So
so do you go down beforehand to do a bit of a recce and see, here's where I'm going to perch myself, here's the tree I'm going to climb?
No wire cutters, no binoculars, no recce. Just I got up and I used the cover of Dog Walker. So I got my parents' dog. I stayed in my parents' house. I got up at it must have been 5:30, because they're about 25-minute walk down to it. Woke up Guinness, the now sadly departed dog, and put on as many clothes as I could, because it was absolutely freezing. And I broke my glasses over Christmas, and I was wearing contacts, so I put in my contacts as well, and wandered down. Halfway down, it was so cold. I don't know if you guys have contact lenses, but I had daily disposables. They dried out. One of them dried out and fell out. Right. So I was like, oh shit, now, and then down to one now. And I got down, and as I walked into the Alfie Byrne Road, obviously one of the players or management turned in as well. So I kind of spotted a copse of trees on the left and headed for them. And my other contact fell out, and I caught it and put it back in. And if I hadn't caught it,
Right, the story never would have appeared.
The story would never appeared. So we made a beeline for these trees, and myself and Guinness, and took out my notepad and.
Was Guinness a quiet dog, or was he?
He was quiet that morning. It was probably too early for him, but yeah, that was one of my risks of exposure. Was that while he was my cover, he might have blown my cover at the same time. Yeah. But no, he managed to stay quiet. I think it was too early for him as well.
I presume because it's the people. I don't know. A lot of people will be familiar with the article from 7 or 8 years ago, and we'll tweet it out as well, Tommy, as well. I think just give people a bit of a flavour if they haven't seen it. But there's a lot of detail in it in terms of this 5-minute segment, and here's what happens 10 minutes later. So you've got your notepad out presumably, and
well, I had 1,000 words to fill, and they weren't doing that much. So it was. I think what was striking was the mundanity of it.
Right.
It was just like any training session. Not that we get to see much training, but like any training session that anyone will be involved in. Again, there was a mystique about it, and you're going down and wondering, what are they doing? Are they doing, like flogging lads with laps, or it was just a training session. And like Gilroy explained it later as being just to fit into people's days, like get it done, and then they have their evenings back. And I think they might have been doubling it up at that time of year, but it was partly commitment, but it was also partly fitting in around. It's an easier time to get to Clontarf than 6 o'clock in the evening. It's like, I think one of the most striking things I think Malachy Clerkin picked up in his book later that year after they'd gone on and won the All-Ireland was that Cluxton was the first player onto the pitch. Just like a little thing. And the next day he might have been the last player on the pitch, but that day he was
from
first
what we
on.
believe, it's first man.
And that was before John Lennor's book or anything like that. So he was on setting the standard. Mickey Whelan, who was I presume is still in the 70s, I think, was out there at 10 to 6 putting out cones. Gilroy was, but it was just quiet. It was hard working, but it was just drills. It was there was nothing remarkable about it, except for the fact that it was 6 a.m. and it was dark and it was cold, and they were just they just got on with it.
Did you get an adrenaline rush from hiding in the bushes watching the dogs?
It was more, you're just afraid of getting caught. You're afraid of making a noise, even though they're all shouting at each other. Once it started, I think I remember it was quite quiet at the start, as it would be. Anyone who goes to the gym at 7 a.m. or like that, any of those classes that you do. No, it's all you leave feeling great, but you first appear absolutely wrecked. So it was quiet at the start, but once they got going, it was normal. So there's no, they didn't. And it was dark, so they were under floodlights. There was no real, but you've got that fear of being caught. So yeah, I probably did.
Were you hidden from view? They couldn't see you, obviously.
I was in amongst trees. I don't know what they could say. I don't think so. I think I was spotted going in, but they just thought I was.
Were you worried that somebody else out walking the dog or out for a general walk would see this guy sort of crouched in
kind of, but it's kind of off the it's just off a main road, and I don't think you would take your dog. And there was no one else up. I have a dog now. People don't get up and walk their dogs that hour. But it was it was genuinely so cold. So yeah, once I got in under the trees, the dog could have done me, but the dog was grand. The dog was quite happy just to he wasn't used to being walked at that early in the morning either. So there was no, you sort of get in and out under cover, and at no point were you sort of rumbled or there was no interaction. You went about your business afterwards. They all just headed for the exit. I don't think, I got the impression they didn't use the showers right in there. They just got back in their cars and headed off, and the exit wasn't where I was. So. Right. No, I had no interaction with them. The only time I could have got spotted was when I walked in that time. The cars came in behind me, and apparently Pat Gilroy may have been in one of those cars and warned the squad that there's some dodgy fellas around. So what's the wallets? Or something. Conor McKeown tweeted that yesterday when someone, I think Dennis Hurley found the article and put it up. Yeah. So. But we found out about that later on, at the end of the season. I'm not sure if the Indo ever got a phone call. I wouldn't been on their radar at all. I was quite new into the game.
Had you been covering any dubs after that? Had you any
interaction? I did a couple of press conferences.
And would he have known?
I was sitting at the back. I would have been covering all sports. I wasn't one of the main guys doing GAA, and I don't think they knew who I was. So I think if it had been, it's probably one of the reasons I was chosen. If it had been one of the lads they knew, it might have had consequences. But I probably would have been in a League of Ireland game that Friday and a bit of AIL on the Saturday. That's kind of what I was doing at the time.
So when you saw a spy from Leeds United showing up to Derby County training ground, were you like, fair play? I respect game, respects game right here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I don't think it's that unusual. I think it's unusual that they get caught, but I think across all sports, we had the fella up the tree down in Kerry that Donegal lad a couple of years ago.
Allegedly, now gone.
Allegedly? Is it?
That's
terribly sad. The act of vandalism against nature, isn't it? But Ireland have a triple reinforced green mesh around their training sessions in Carton House. There's got to be a reason for that. They're obviously afraid that someone's watching them.
Must be. It can't be difficult with all the modern technology that exists. If you wanted to I mean, I can't imagine a green fence would. If I wanted to see what was going on, I'm sure I'd be able to find a way.
I'm sure Eddie Jones has a drone that he can just fly over.
Yeah, drone might be a little unsubtle, like.
Oh, what's this?
You know, I've heard stuff about, like, you know, coaches getting planes diverted so they don't fly over stadiums for captain run and stuff like that. Like, coaches are ultra paranoid. I'd say this Bielsa thing has just sent a rocket through all the English coaches without saying, you know, like they're doubling up on their security and stuff. And I'm sure it's the same in all sports because this stuff does happen. There's obviously, for all that Bielsa said, there obviously is some sort of competitive advantage in doing it. You know, it's you know, like, you know, someone like me, I was just watching and recounting. I didn't really glean anything from it from a tactical point of view. But I'm sure if someone who knew a bit more about Gaelic football they might have picked up something. You know.
Just one last thing is Henry Winter was kind of got a bit of criticism this week for a bit of a double standard, criticising the kind of intelligence that they were trying to seek from a Leeds United perspective, despite the fact that he tried to get England teams from in previous World Cups to publish for his newspaper. Have you heard any other rugby hacks that have gone to that length to actually do a Henry Winter on the Irish rugby team?
No, I don't think so. There's the odd open training session that you get to watch, but I'm not aware of it. But like when it's an open training session or when you're in somewhere where you can see training, you'll obviously have a look, or you'll watch the 10-15 minutes that you can and maybe dwell for a little while longer as much as you can. But at this stage, I think they used to watch it all the time and used to glean stuff off it. But unfortunately, in the modern era, it's not welcome. And I'd say Dublin might have ramped up their security as well. I think Peter Sweeney was invited, he was in the Star at the time, invited back the next year to try, I think, to ward off the unwelcome ones. Yeah, it was kind of a, you know...
Bring one in and sort of do
exactly.
a false session.
Yeah, exactly. So, because, I mean, Joe, in rugby, whenever they have the open sessions, they don't do anything...
No, like, same at the international football team, they just come in and they do a bit of a warm-up, and then once the serious stuff starts, they get the hacks to help. But
they do these open sessions. They're doing one Belfast, one in the Aviva this month, but they don't do any of their team shape stuff. They just do. It's a full session and it's quite committed against the 20s and stuff. But he knows.
You've ruined it for all of us, Rory, is what you're saying.
I have, yeah, and I apologise to everyone.
You're going to come back to us in a few minutes, I think, to chat a little bit rugby.
Why not?
And John Alan Quinlan, that's coming up very shortly, and Darren Cleary on the way as well to bring us up to speed with all the live sport. But before all of that, the Keith Andrews show went out yesterday, as it always does, of a Thursday afternoon. Joe was alongside Keith, and they discussed, of course, Martin O'Neill's appointment at Nottingham Forest.
It's great. I mean, the money. So O'Neill is at the opposite end of the spectrum to Bielsa in terms of preparation. It struck me that Ireland played their very best football at Euro 2016 when the players were together every day. They were effectively like a club. They were probably developing patterns of play and partnerships on the pitch just in training, just through regularity. So it strikes me O'Neill is much better. O'Neill's style is much better suited to club than international. So he could go in there and oversee things, and they won't look as disjointed because they're together every day.
Well, his last club job was Sunderland, obviously, and that's a blot on his copybook in terms of his club management. I agree.
Before that, in fairness, there's this issue in that football has changed quite a lot in the last 10 years, and the preparation has changed. But before Sunderland, his record is fairly phenomenal. It really is. So it's a real chance for him to rehabilitate his career in our eyes, almost. You know, because it was funny. I was reading Daniel Taylor's piece in the Guardian before he got the job announced, and you know, he was making the point that look, he got the Ireland job. He took them to the knockout stages Euro 2016, eliminated by France. He also took them to the qualifying playoffs for the last World Cup at the expense of the Welsh side, who had reached the Euro 2016 semi-finals. He's faced criticism from the Irish media about his style of play, whereas Forest have taken the alternative view that he inherited the least talented group of players the country has produced for many years, and in fact overachieved. They went to a major tournament, they beat Italy, and they beat Germany, the world champions, in the process. That is a very easy narrative to sell to the Nottingham Forest hierarchy, who won't have heard the nitty-gritty of our issues with the Ireland job.
They probably won't care.
They won't care that much, but that is how he's perceived across the water, and it's a justifiable argument as well.
His case.
It totally is. So I'd be very interested to see how he does day-to-day at club level, where maybe the lack of preparation isn't as damaging as when a team just comes together every 2 or 3 months.
Full show up on youtube.com/offtheball or up on offtheball.com as well. A few people pointing out that the Ireland Cup final is not on Sunday night, it's on tonight, so bit of a wasted trip for me if I was to head out there on Sunday. Just means that Westmeath are going to have the money in the bag early doors. Darren Cleary is with us. Good morning to you, Darren.
Good morning, Adrian. We'll start with the live sport this morning, and Shane Lowry took a one-shot lead into the third round of the Abu Dhabi Championship. A second round of 70 left the Offaly man on 12 under par. Louis Westhuizen and Richard Sterney a shot off the pace. Lowry, speaking before he took off this morning, delighted to be leading after a poor start to his second round.
I struggled at the start. I hit some really ropey shots. Didn't feel too comfortable, but I made a great up and down in the third hole for bogey, and I think that kind of kick-started me. I hit, pretty much was hitting the ball decent after that for the rest of the day. I gave myself a lot of chances. I didn't convert as many as I would have liked, but I'm pretty happy to shoot 70 and be in the lead going into the weekend is always nice. My arm play has been pretty good, and I've been playing the par 3 as well, so I fancied that one on 12, and I'm pretty happy where my game's at, and I'm looking forward to the weekend. We're playing a huge event here, first one of the year, and there's not another Rolex event for a while, so it'd be nice to get off to a good start and get some points on the race to the Y board, and then kick on from there.
Now, Shane Lowry's out already this morning. He's just parred the first hole, 10 under now. Lee Westwood motoring well, 4 under. He's finished his round. So 10 under at the moment, Lee Westwood joining the top. Then there's a chasing pack of Ian Poulter on 9 under, Scott Jamieson and Tom Lewis. Meanwhile, stateside, Phil Mickelson started his 2019 campaign in style with the lowest round of his golfing career. The American just missed out on shooting a round of 59 at the Desert Classic, but the 5-time major winner was happy to settle for a career low 60 on Thursday. Big Phil is on 12 under. Waterford native Seamus Power carded an opening round of 74 at that tournament. While in the tennis, Maria Sharapova has dumped the defending champion Caroline Wozniacki out of the Australian Open. The Russian, who was banned for 2 years for doping back in 2016, recorded a 6-4, 4-6, 6-3 victory to reach the fourth round. For Sharapova, this will be the fourth time she has reached the last 16 and a major since her return from a ban, but she's yet to go beyond the quarter-finals. Roger Federer eased into the fourth round of the tournament with a straight sets victory over Taylor Fritz. Unseeded Czech Thomas Berdych also through as he continues to rediscover his form. Soccer next, and Martin O'Neill hopes Roy Keane will join him at Nottingham Forest. O'Neill has become the 13th permanent Forest manager in 8 seasons. He's aiming to guide the troubled club back to the Premier League. The former Republic of Ireland boss takes charge for the first game tomorrow. It's at home to Bristol City, and the new Forest manager says Keane has a number of matters to consider, including the fact his father is ill at the moment.
Well, I would dearly like him to join us, and again, since this has happened very, very quickly, he has a number of things to sort out himself. I think that we've had some discussions here. I would genuinely like him to do so. I'd like him to join if that's the case. There's a spot open for him, and I'm hoping that may happen. It may not. He has a number of things. Obviously, he has to consider himself, both personally and professionally, and but he will keep me informed. But I would dearly like him to join up. He was a great asset to me as when I was the manager and assistant manager of Republic of Ireland, with some really great days. Tough to handle, there's no doubt at all about it, But you know that with him, and that's probably what makes him pretty special.
Now, Jose Mourinho has taken aim at a younger generation of managers, claiming they're all style and no substance. Mourinho has resurfaced following a sacking on beIN Sports, and the axed one appears to have taken a swipe at the Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp and Tottenham's Mauricio Pochettino. He was speaking generally about managers who receive pundits' praise for their style but lack any trophies.
It's very easy to play well and not win. It's very easy to be behind a certain idea of a certain football without results. And the people that wins, and the people that wins consistently, because you can win isolated and then disappear. The people that win consistently has obviously a different idea about that. If you speak about Guardiola, about Ancelotti, about the ones where obviously I belong, that have a career of victories for long, long periods. Where are the young ones with a real impact in terms of results? Where are they?
He could just as easily be talking about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. It strikes me there that the short-term success or run of results that isn't necessarily what Jose Mourinho would describe as success. So, I mean, people are interpreting as a pop at Klopp, and as well it may be, but it might catch Solskjaer in his net as well.
Yeah, it seemed to be a pretty strange setup because it's just Mourinho. It didn't seem like there was anyone asking him questions. All the seeded out video from beIN Sports, it was almost like his Golden Cleric speech where he's just having vague pops at everyone without being too specific or being asked any questions by anyone. A strange enough interview. But Peter O'Mahony is Munster's main injury concern as they prepare to name their team for tomorrow's Champions Cup clash with Exeter at Thomond Park. O'Mahony suffered a rib injury during last week's win in Gloucester, and the Munster captain still rated as 50-50 at best to keep his place in the back row. It's simple enough permutation wise, a win or a draw enough against Exeter for Munster to top their pool. Leinster could recall Sean O'Brien, Robbie Henshaw and Devon Turner for their game against Wasps in Coventry on Sunday in the Champions Cup. All three trained fully this week. Johnny Sexton remains out of action with that knee injury suffered against Munster over Christmas. Leinster know a win over Wasps will qualify them for the quarterfinals, but a home tie is only guaranteed should they add a bonus point. Well, Warren Gatland says he's held informal conversations over coaching the British and Irish Lions again in 2021. The New Zealander led them on their last two tours. They drew the series in New Zealand in 2017. In 2013, they recorded a win over Australia. Gatland will leave his role as the Wales head coach after nearly 12 years in charge following the World Cup in Japan. And finally, it's official, Richard Keogh is bigger than Brexit. He was the hero for Derby County earlier this week. They advanced to the next stage of the FA Cup with a penalty shootout victory over Southampton. More people watched the Ireland defender score the winning spot kick than Theresa May addressed the nation after the Brexit vote on TV. With extra time in the FA Cup clash, coverage of the British Prime Minister's speech was bumped from BBC One to BBC Two. Gary Lineker revealed viewership figures for the Cup replay peaked at 4.6 million during the penalty shootout, 2 million more than watched May deliver the speech on BBC Two.
Could have watched both.
You could have watched both. If they start calling him Keogh instead of Keogh, then Brexit is officially off the table.
Darren, thanks a million.
Cheers,
for
Adrian.
that, for the minute. Have a good weekend. Alan Quinlan standing by, Rory O'Connor standing by. We're going to get stuck into the rugby in just a few minutes, but before all of that, a great story from our series, The Leaders' Questions with Stuart Lancaster, all of which is available up, the full series available up on youtube.com/offtheball. Performance coach Bill Beswick on the latest episode here, speaking about Steve McLaren's first training session as a coach at Manchester United in early 1999.
Well, a story I can share with you, and I think my friend Steve McLaren wouldn't mind. I've heard him talk about this publicly, but he came from Derby County to Manchester United in the space of 3 days. His life was turned upside down. He was the assistant manager of Manchester United. So for his first day's training, he decided that he would take a fun approach and get to know them and make it a little bit more social. So he did team relays and team competitions to try and bed himself in. And partway through this, Roy, who'd lost a competition and was made to do press-ups, walked off the field. He did say something, but I'm not going to repeat it, yeah. He walked off the field and went home. And when I got back from Derby County that evening, Steve was on the phone to me and explained to me he was really devastated. His captain had walked off the field in the first day of training. And I said, you've got to ring Roy. And that was like asking somebody to catch a hand grenade. I said, you've got to ring Roy. One principle of coaching is never let today's problem roll into tomorrow. It gets worse. Deal with it now. He rang Roy, and 2 hours later he rang me and said, I've just had a masterclass in coaching. The only thing that Roy is interested in is hard work and challenge, because that's what prepares him to go out in front of 75,000 people and television cameras on a Saturday. If he's not worked hard during the week, he doesn't feel ready for the performance on a Saturday. And I'd taken one of those training sessions that he needs so badly and abused it by doing things that weren't relevant to the game. That was Roy. He was very honest, very tough-minded, but actually very intelligent and perceptive about what top players needed.
Bill Beswick there in conversation with Stuart Lancaster during the week. As I said, you can check out that full piece up on our YouTube channel. It's nearly 9 o'clock. Rory's back with us, as you can see. And Alan Quinlan, good morning to you.
Morning, Adrian.
That piece there, I don't know how much of you heard, but Bill Beswick, who's a performance coach, talking to Stuart Lancaster and Ger about Steve McLaren, who he would have worked with, and his first session as a coach at Manchester United, and to try and synopsise this as brief as I can. He goes in, holds a session, bit of a sort of personalised, bit of fun, get to know each other. Keane storms off after a while, out of the training area, goes home. McLaren rings him later in the day, and Keane is like, you ruined that session for me. I needed to perform my best at the weekend, and you just trampled all over it. And as you heard, McLaren takes it all very personally and, you know, apologises and all that stuff. Like, there's another side to it that actually, maybe for the entirety of the rest of the squad, that fun thing of getting to know each other and something different at training totally worked.
It's a vital part of high performance, that you have a break, have some fun sometime. Look, I'm not sure what match it was that week and where Roy was at, but that's we know from him speaking about it himself that that's the way he wanted to be every week, and that's what made him tick, that kind of desire and drive and motivation. In rugby, I'd often compare Paul to Roy Keane, just the detail and the energy and the you know, pushing each other in training and trying to get better all the time. But there was a great sense of fun in Paul off the field as well. Now, I don't know, I'm not saying that Roy Keane isn't a good crack off the field, because I've met him personally a few times, and he likes the rugby, and he met us in New Zealand in 2008 on tour there, and he was great crack. Right. We went out for dinner with him, about 5 or 6 of us, and he invited us out, and he was in with Munster a few times, and he was always great crack, great man for a few stories and stuff. So, but it's kind of like switching on to that psycho mode on the training pitch, where I can relate to myself, where I was so kind of fired up and in a different zone as a player, and more relaxed off the field and laid back and calmer. Not completely, like, but, you know, a different, and the sports persons, people are different when they go across that line, and his line was when you go out onto the training pitch, not just the matches, but Roy Keane's was on the training pitch. So, but I've even been with Munster for that period of time where we were trying to grow stuff, and there was all different characters coming in and out, and we were trying to get better year after year, and there was a real ambition, and that was being driven by the players. At times we just downed tools and went for a few pints or went away, go-karting, paintball shooting, whatever the case may be. And, you know, so I think I can understand what McLaren was trying to do, but I can also understand that's what made Keane tick.
And I think by all accounts he was definitely a man for all of those things you've spoken about, but also I just don't know that he was acutely aware of what he needed. I'm just not sure, as the club captain, he was acutely aware necessarily of what everybody else
That's
required.
the key. I think, you know, I think if you give him his time back, hindsight's a great thing. When experience is good and bad, you can change some things and maybe relax. So he probably put a lot of pressure on himself that this is what he needed, and sometimes when you're in that zone you think it's what everyone else needed. I saw so many different characters over the years in dressing rooms. Some guys who needed to bang their head off a wall to get up for a game, other guys who were just listening to music, guys who'd walk around the pitch to have their routine. Some guys are laughing and joking, and that's the part that used to annoy some players. Why is he laughing? Why is he chatting? Is he not focused? But everybody's different in the way they deal with the show. The show is when the curtain opens, when you go out onto the field and the ball is kicked off in whatever sport, and in rugby or soccer or whatever. And different people deal with that. So I think that's why sports science nowadays is trying to and has gone to a different level about preparing people, and the one word you hear a lot is trying to be relaxed, because that's where you can't play the game in the dressing room, or you can't play it afterwards. It's out on the field, and people handle that in different ways. So there's loads of different characters, and I would have seen so many different over the years. Like I say, some guys chatting, having a laugh, and you think, are they not up for the game? But they are actually up for it, but that's their way of kind of staying calm. So I think Roy was, by his own admission, was this person who was just had that game face on all the time. I'm a Liverpool fan, but I loved watching Keane, and I just think of that United coming down the tunnel against Arsenal, and the face looking across at Vieira.
See you out there.
That's you know, but that's what made him great as well. Do you know what I mean? But maybe he didn't have the balance with that all the time, just for his own sanity, really, and his own calmness. But hey, he's had some career. To be fair, he was incredible at United.
We had James Bond in earlier on telling us about his stint spying in the Dublin Footballers. Are there any good stories of either being spied on or spying on other teams?
No, I think we have a good story. Pat Geraghty, Lord to mercy on him, was
former Munster press officer.
Yeah, and Rory, probably you would have probably got to know Pat, and in Pat's latter years and you were starting out, Pat was so paranoid about anyone watching training that he'd be going around the hill, the ball and UL, looking out over the pitch, checking the ditch, see was there anyone in there. And he was brilliant, and we used to get a kick out of it. And we would actually egg Pat on to go, oh, Pat, there's someone over there watching training. And like, there'd be two students having a chat, like, and Pat would go over and
wide open down
harass them, yeah, you know what I mean? So, like, when you're in a wide open space, but France was really good because we were, I think we were in Stade Francais, I think it was 2004 or 5, and there was someone up in the stand, and Pat went up and had a right go off him. And there was someone doing maintenance in the stadium or cleaning or something, and you know, so it was brilliant. He was always kind of, but I'd say we were spied on loads of times in France because you've no idea. You're kind of doing a captain's run in the stadium, and it's so easy to do it.
Or would you be going? You wouldn't be going full bore though at the captain's run.
This is the thing. You can have someone look, but you don't. The tactics and you know as a journalist, Rory, going to the captain's run on a Friday now is kind of pointless.
Yeah.
You don't see anything. It's good for player, if I'm doing commentary, identifying players and the opposition and body language, and you get a sense of the mood in the camp. You chat to a few people, but as regards going seeing any sort of tactics on a Friday, you don't see them. And that's why I think, look, it's Joe Schmidt's kind of squads since he took over. It's closed shop during the week, and I think it's right for the players. It's not right for the journalists, in a sense that they'd love to have more access and see more. But that's just the way of the world now. I think when you're doing those kind of tactics and it's in the intricate kind of tactical approach in all sports. So I'd say we were spied on loads of times, and in those earlier days, I'd say we confused more the spies than actually give them any information by probably training useless or making loads of mistakes or messing up some moves that we were trying to run. But it's an interesting one. But the rugby one then, the one in New Zealand when they went to Australia when there was
That's right, yeah.
sort of a device found in the... It's the only rugby really one I've heard from.
Other than them actually letting out their line-out calls before the 2015 final. Wasn't it Australia, the coach accidentally...
They left him up on a board or something?
Left him up on a board, and the line-out calls were revealed before the World Cup final.
Yeah, that's a danger, because that is one area that if I was... You have to be very careful with the line-outs, because there's a certain kind of template that you'd use for each game tailored to the opposition. So if you're actually practicing the ones you're going to use, and somebody's... Like if I saw a team doing a set of line-outs now before a game, and these are the ones they're going to use, I could easily say, look, defend this way, do it this way. They're throwing a lot to the tail, and they do this sort of movement, and you could actually mess up some of those lineouts. And so it's a lineouts are a dodgy one to ride for sure.
One of the other things that we wanted to touch on before we get into the rugby this weekend was Eddie Jones at his press conference yesterday, and my read on it is there's some awful mad stuff coming out of it. Left field thinking could be the key to England's World Cup success was one of the headlines that I read here. I mean, it struck me there's maybe not much else working for them, but Eddie Jones is talking about, on the one hand, Jack Noel, who's a back, coming in to play in the forwards as an open side flanker, I think he's suggesting, and then on another hand he's talking about starting 9 forwards. So he's talking about one hand playing 8 backs and another hand playing 9 forwards. Rugby World Cup year, is he panicking, Quinny? Is he cracking
He's just thrown out a bit of some information there to kind of confuse people, or just playing mind games. Really, he's not going to play Jack Noel as a number 7. Not a chance.
It's hard to know when you're not in the room, but I got a transcript of that yesterday. I almost binned that whole section. I was like, that is just... There's no way he's playing Jack Noel at 7 and Joe Cocker-Singa in the second row. Like, and he starts talking about the future of the game and all that sort of stuff. I think he was just playing for time, you know. I mean, it just... I'm not sure what... Like, Eddie Jones walks into those rooms with a strategy of what he's going to say and what he's going to do. And he was very complimentary about Ireland yesterday, but didn't really want to get into Ireland and the game. He'll do that next week, or he'll probably do that at the launch when there's a couple of Irish journalists there to get the maximum impact. He was just playing for time. He does way more press than certainly Joe Schmidt does. So sometimes he's gold, other times he goes down rabbit holes like that.
The point Rory is saying about the game changing in the modern game, of course there's loads of backs that could play as back rows. There's loads of back rows that could play as wingers. Absolutely, there's a ton of them that could do that in the modern game. But you get into the technical side of it then. We saw what happened with...
Bergamasco.
Bergamasco playing there, but also the rugby league player who played for England.
Oh, Burgess.
Sam Burgess as well. He was being messed around 6'12", 6'12". Playing the back row is a different thing. I think a back row can play, if he's quick enough, could play in the wing or on the wing more than a back coming into. Dennis Leamy went out centre for a period in 2000 under Alan Gaffney with us because we had issues there and problems with injuries, and he played a couple of games as a centre. David Wallace played in the wing in the Celtic Cup final against the Scarlets at one stage. And
he ended up out there in the Italy game that time.
So I think back rows can probably do that, but the technical side of the breakdown is an issue. If you're Jack Noel would get blown away as a wing forward.
If any of this was a good idea, but he wouldn't be doing it in a Rugby World Cup year, right? Like he'd have done it 2 years ago if this
Adrian,
was...
he won't do any of this stuff.
Right.
He's a squad there. The squad they've picked for the Ireland, for the Six Nations, a very strong squad. The Vunipola brothers back, Joe Launchbury back, Jack Clifford is back. He's a really good player who's had his injury problems. Tom Curry's a really good 7. I think Underhill being injured is a loss for him. But I think they've loads of options. It's a really good squad.
Is it close to 2017 levels here in terms of the potential of England in the Six Nations?
I think so. They're very strong. There's a lot of talent there. The issues we have with the English players is their club form sometimes, and probably it is a legitimate argument, the amount of games they play. The problem for Eddie Jones is when Ireland played England at Twickenham last year, the players were bashed to pieces by him. Every single, and that's what I was hearing in Twickenham, how hard they trained throughout that Six Nations. They were in full-on contact every week. The Tuesday or the Wednesday I think it was the Wednesday of the Irish game, they did something like an hour and a half of full-on contact. And you've got to experience that to understand how much you can take out of the body. It's like playing a midweek game. And sometimes the training sessions take more out of you because you actually have more direct impacts in those small drills where you're doing a ruck and drill or one-on-one tackling. You can actually hurt yourself and physically kind of get lots of bumps and bruises in those training sessions. The modern game has to, and the International Rugby Player Survey will tell us that players want less contact in training. They want to play less matches, particularly the English ones. Our player welfare programme is exceptional here, and it's the envy of most of the world. England have got to sort that out themselves, because on paper, they're a team that can beat anyone at any stage, and make no bones about it, you could not underestimate that group coming to Dublin next week. And if they get it right, they're a very, very dangerous proposition. But the key for England and Eddie Jones is learning from some of his mistakes. That was a championship decider last year, and he believed at that time that to have full-on contact and the players ripping shreds out of each other was the best preparation for Ireland, as opposed to Ireland probably did no contact, very little contact that week, and were fresh. And I think that's the kind of voice of the players nowadays, is that they've got to be fresh. There's a certain amount of contact you have to do in a week's training. Some of that can be on pads and stuff. It's different. I genuinely remember doing drills sometimes before in a 3 or 4 metre gap width, and a player standing in the middle, 4 or 5 players, and you had to go through this drill, and it was literally no space to go. It was just trying to run out over people or getting dumped back in your backside. And so contact and training is something that in the modern game that needs to be tailored a little bit. You do need it at times.
We get into the games?
May as well.
Yeah. We're going to start with Munster Exeter, which is at Thomond Park tomorrow at 5:30, lads. So get your thoughts on this one. Like Munster, looking at the pools, they're I think the lowest points total of any of the pool leaders. But at the same time, it seems to me, perfect conditions for a Munster team. It's winner takes all, obviously, against Exeter.
Yeah, well, they'll find out tonight whether the home quarter-final is on the card. So if Montpellier beat Edinburgh, I think that it opens up.
Right.
And I think that Montpellier team are more than capable of going to Edinburgh and winning. So they'll know what faces them. But I think it's going to be Edinburgh away in the quarter-final. And Murrayfield is hardly the most intimidating of away venues. So they play there all the time as well. So it's a fairly, as away quarterfinals go, I think that they'd back themselves. So they were, for most of the 80 minutes, they were a better team in Exeter and probably left it behind them, but then got away with it in the last couple of minutes as well. It was a great game, but it was a strange game. Omani's, presuming he's out, Omani would be a big loss. And I think that's been downplayed a bit this week, which is strange. it's only when they get out there they'll realise what they're missing with him, because he's been in sensational form. But if Clooney comes, I presume they won't pick Clooney because they need a line-out option. So it probably maybe Wycherley who was outstanding against Leinster. So there's a couple of variables in it, but if they're anywhere near as good as they were last week, I think they'll get the job done at home. And if Edinburgh do if Edinburgh do win tonight and the home quarter-final is off the table regardless, they only need a losing bonus, and stop Exeter getting 4 tries to get through. I can't see Exeter getting the 4-0 split or the 5-1 split that they need. They might get a win, but I just don't see them getting enough.
Quinny, what are you thinking?
It's going to be tricky, I think, but Exeter have been poor in this competition. The loss away, I think they got a bit shell-shocked maybe by the intensity Munster brought in round 1, and sometimes they talk about the Premiership being the best league in the world. It's a very intense league, there's no doubt about that, but sometimes I don't know if the quality is there.
They are the current league leaders, 4 points.
Yeah, Exeter and Saracens have kind of bucked the trend, haven't they? They've been the ones who've consistently been good, but Exeter, they've been Europe 5 times since they got promoted, and they haven't won a knockout game. They haven't got into the knockout. They've got to quarterfinals once, and they were beaten. They fluked into it about 2 years ago on 16 points at the end. So they've been disappointing. I think they see this as one that I sense this is a kind of a throw the kitchen sink at it and hope for the best. And we're not expected to win, and that makes them quite dangerous because they're a quality side and they've won on the road a lot in the Premiership in the last number of years. So Thomond Park is not just going to win this game for Munster. They've got to play well. I think they're in good form. They're full of confidence. The last couple of weeks have been brilliant for them. The way Carberry responded after Cass and the way he's played, the way he makes him tick. Having Chris Farrell back is important. Tommy O'Donnell has been really important for him. He was really good last week again. Byrne and Clyne in the second row have been arguably the form second row partnership in last weekend. They were brilliant. Yeah. And I think they offer him that real kind of balance as a second row. Byrne has just been sensational, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. No, his post stretch just makes such a difference to them. I hope they keep their foot in the pedal. Yeah, because they during the early stages.
Rory, the only issue is themselves here tomorrow.
Oh, absolutely, because they went out and that performance in Exeter was excellent, and the following week they weren't great against Gloucester. Cast at home actually at home they haven't been fantastic in Europe this year, whereas their away form's got more headlines. So they were good against Connacht, they were brilliant against Gloucester. You just hope they can sustain that and then break for the internationals on a high.
You just think if they'd won that game in Cass, we spoke about the injustices that happened, but also their own management and their own performance. They could be looking at being seeded 1 or 2 tomorrow. Yeah,
just on the
and that would actually give you a home semi-final this year. Yeah. So it's that Cass game, and I know I'll keep going back to it. Could be it's done now, but it could be very costly.
So is the game in Sandy Park. But just on the Tadhg Byrne case, and you mentioned the line out there as well. Cian Tracy writing in your paper this morning that if the Six Nations had started last week, we would have been, from an Irish perspective, we would have been missing our 2 main line out callers in Devon Toner and Ian Henderson. How important is it from a provincial perspective that James Ryan has started calling line outs for Leinster and Tadhg Byrne is getting involved in a similar area from a Munster perspective?
It's important for any second row to be able to call line outs, in my opinion. I call a fair few lineouts when I played with Munster or Ireland over the years, and it frustrated me at times that you think, well, it's not my job to call the lineouts. I think having the ability to call the lineouts mean you understand the lineout really well. You understand, and you it takes a little bit of time for some guys.
Why were you calling them? If you were saying it wasn't your job to be doing it?
No, it was. I shared them at times with Paul. I would have called a lot of the short lineouts because we did 4-man lineouts with me standing at halfback, where I'd step in and out of the lineout. 5-man lineouts with me at halfback. 6-man lineouts with me at halfback. And Paul would manage to call the bigger ones, the full lineouts. And obviously he went on to be one of the best lineout callers and best tacticians in a lineout in World Rugby. Himself and Matt Field are always spoken about how good they were. Ben Kay was a brilliant line-out forward for England and Leicester. Donnacha Ryan is someone who, I think I remember it was about 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when Paul got injured for the Scotland game in Dublin. I think he was 13. And he had to come in and call the line-out straight away. And it was a real kind of baptism of fire, but he had learned a lot about the ability to do that. And like I say, when I go back to the original point, if you have the ability to call the line-out, it means you understand the line-out. And the more forwards you have, even props understanding the line-out, the better. So they can see a little bit of space themselves when they're that kind of keyed into where my man is going to probably call it. There's 2 spaces here, and you know, they're switching on a little bit. The old traditional way was, well, I'm a prop, I don't have a lot to do, or I just lift, and the guy at the tail of the line, the 7 had his hands and his hips. But that, you know, it's changed over the years. Everybody needs to be really clued in. So I think any second row that plays now at any level, ideally, some of them do it naturally than others. They want to boss the line out.
Yeah.
It's part of their role to make them tick, and they believe it can be one here, there and everywhere. But every second row nowadays, in my opinion, should have that ability. Because if one guy goes off, he can take over. And like Devon Toner was someone who was quiet when he kind of started playing with Leinster and Ireland, and he played a good bit with Paul as well, and Paul would have still called the lineouts, but he's someone now who has run the Leinster lineout superbly and the Irish lineout as well. Henderson started doing it at the Lions tour, does it for Ulster now as well. So the more guys you can get having that ability, so it's not just about being the dominant one, it means everybody understands. So the more guys, back rows as well, who have that ability to be able to say, you know, I'm going to call a few lineouts if need be.
The other technical area that's kind of touched on in the papers this morning, and I know you were at the press conference, Rory, is Josh van der Fleer's quotes, and I guess we can start talking about Leinster now. What was he saying exactly about not getting carried away with the idea of becoming David Pocock?
He was, yeah, I think the major thing that he had to work on was getting in over the ball. I think that's what Levy and O'Brien have over him. He's probably the best tackler of the 3, and he's a very good carrier as well. I love the way he accelerates into contact, but he probably isn't as good over the ball. He's not as strong over the ball. Like Levy's, incredible at it, but it probably gets him injured as well. So he was talking about how he was trying to get better in that area, and Lancaster took him aside and said, look, you can't go chasing this. You got to identify the time. So, Pocock is just a natural. He gets in over the ball. It's what he does. It's his role. But Van der Fleer has about 10 roles to do in the Leinster setup in the Ireland team. So it's just don't go into every breakdown because we need you in the defensive line. So he's trying to learn to identify the ones that he should go into. And I think that's a skill that players probably get from experience as well. So he's getting better at it. I still don't think he's at the level of the others, but he brings so much to the table in other departments. But I guess when you're, like, they can only take 5 back rows to the World Cup. If O'Brien, Van der Fleer and Levy are fit, I think Van der Fleer misses out personally. So he's trying to get himself better in that department so that he's giving himself as good a chance to go to that World Cup as possible. And he's becoming harder and harder to leave out. Right now, I'd say he's going to start 7 against England because he's the man in position and he's fit and firing. O'Brien might come back in tomorrow's game, but I'd say probably on the bench if he does. So he was just talking about basically upskilling and trying to get better, but doing it smartly.
One of the other sort of lines that was coming out of that press conference yesterday was John Fogarty talking at length about the sort of coldness of Leo Cullen's selection, and with Jack McGrath particularly missing out in the matchday squad, I think entirely last week. I mean, it struck me actually that Fogarty talks about what an amazing reaction McGrath had to it, and he was brilliant about the place and he was cajoling everybody else and helping them along the way. But at the same time, like, if you're Jack McGrath and you've missed out in the squad entirely, given from the heights that he's come from, it might be the sort of day or the sort of week that you're thinking, actually, my future belongs somewhere else.
It was a big call. I think it caught everyone by surprise a little bit. But I think the story we were hearing is Ed Byrne was flying it in training. And sometimes, we all buy into reputations, say, well, he's such and such an international, he starts normally, and then someone jumps out of nowhere. So Ed Byrne is not going to sit back and say, well, I'm happy to be behind Cian Healy and Jack McGrath. He's obviously thrown down the gauntlet and he's caught Leo Cullen's eye in some way, and maybe he felt that, it was a little bit of a shake-up for Jack McGrath that would kind of drive him on to get his standards high. Maybe again, if they had dropped, it's all speculation. You think a year and a half ago I felt he should have been starting for the Lions, and he came off the bench in the 3 tests and he was brilliant. And
there was nothing between himself and Healy.
Very little, yeah. And Vunapolo, even who was the man in possession of the Lions jersey, there was an argument to start Jack ahead of him in the 3rd test anyway, definitely. Yeah. But he's a great player, and I think it's good to hear that the response there was one of anger and frustration, which is natural for players when you lose out.
I think he's back. I think he's in the team for tomorrow. Okay. I think it was one of the things they took. I think he's starting. I think. Right. Yeah. So I think that's kind of that smart management. Take him out and then put him in. And but I believe after the 2016 Pro 14 final defeat, they had a big soul-searching kind of, it was a terrible season, Leo Cullen and his management team. One of the things they said was, if the young guys are going well, we're not putting guys in based on the caps that they've won, because it's not. We need to reward form. I think the couple of players were picked who probably weren't fit or firing ahead of players who've been going better. And the following season, Rob Kearney was picked on the bench away to Cast. I can't remember who they picked ahead of him, but Nasiwa started with O'Loughlin and Byrne, who were very new on the wings, and that was a kick in the backside for Rob Kearney. And he's the starting number 15 again. But it's just one of those things that you've got to be a bit more. They've decided to be more ruthless and to reward form, and it's paid dividends for them, because whenever they go with the young guys, it works.
They need just a draw to top the pool. You're heading over to that game, I think? Yeah,
I'm doing the Ulster game on Saturday and the Wasps game on Sunday. I just can't see any reason why Wasps would beat them. Like, Wasps are so way out. They're just way out of the running. They've had a week of losing players, signing players. They just seem to be all at sea. So they'll probably put up to them for 40 minutes. But even if they get O'Brien, Henshaw, Kearney back on deck this week as well.
Toner will be back.
Toner should be back.
I mean, they'll want to play with the game in 2 weeks.
So I think
they'll want
Portugal next week, so they want to play.
Yeah, they seem to have come through that little bit of a blip potentially as well in good fettle. Ulster, obviously, Leicester on Saturday at 3:30, and a bonus point win here. Quinny takes all the guessing out of the equation from an Ulster point of view. Tough got though.
I just think a win will put them through. It'll definitely put them through in second place. They're on 18 points. If they get to 22, they're guaranteed to be in the last 8. I just don't know what's going to happen with Leicester. Do you?
There's more chance of a Leicester performance than a Wasp performance.
Absolutely, because of the tradition and maybe the anger and the frustration that's there. That their form has been terrible. I think they've lost 7 in the Premiership and just 1 in Europe. They've only 1 win in Europe, so I think it's to go to Scarlets last week and be beaten 33-10. They were 33-0 down at one stage. I think if I was a Leicester fan, I'd be really concerned with what's happening there at the moment. But they will probably throw out as best they can. Jordan Murphy will, to try. They need to get a win and get a bit of a feel-good.
They want a springboard into their next couple of weeks. I think Jordan Murphy will be targeting this as if you beat these lads, you can kind of go into.
I think it's a great chance for Ulster, isn't it? If they keep it together now, Cooney and Burns, they'll need them.
It's the kind of game they've lost in the past, in the last couple of years. It's kind of one where they slip up. They got a big win last week, and they kind of fell over the line a bit against Racing.
Their game management has been an issue for them. They started well in Racing and just lost control of the ball as well. And last nearly, the crowd got them over the line at the end, and a few mistakes from Racing, but they've got to play well here. You'd think just go to Leicester now. They've only won 1 game. It's just a case of Ulster. They'll get the win, but it'll be different. I just sense you're right. It'll be different than Wasps. There'll be a real kind of anger and a pressure on the Leicester players to perform, and they'll make it tricky for Ulster.
We'll chat next week, lads. See if you're right. Thanks, William. Enjoy the games over the weekend, Rory and Alan. So we've live commentary, by the way, of the Wasp Leinster game as well on Sunday, and in the commentary box there's going to be Conor Morris alongside Brendan Mackin and Jake Heenan, so do tune in for that. Next up, Donegal manager Declan Bonner and Carlow boss Turlock O'Brien discussed the impact on last night's show that Gaelic's experimental rules have had on their preparation for the league and the championship.
Well, we've trained with the rules in mind. I know a lot of counties aren't using the new rules, but we certainly decided we couldn't afford to take the rules. And we've been training under the new rules. Not saying we've mastered them, because I don't think we have. And that's the approach we've had to take. Again, it's out of our hands. I think the referees are finding it difficult as well. I think there's a lot under plate trying to manage the game as it is, and these are additional demands on them, and they want eyes in the back of their heads for the one at times. I think it's really putting too much pressure on referees. Publicly, referees are saying yes, they support it, but privately, it's a different message that they're giving to coaches and managers.
Declan, how have you approached it over the last few weeks?
Listen, we haven't really done a huge amount on it, to be quite honest. I felt from day one, especially the hand pass rule, it just wasn't workable, to be quite honest. We had to do a bit of work on some of the other stuff, but in terms of hand pass, it was just you had to bring it up and mention it at matches and stuff like that there. But it was just mean, apart from ruining a football game, it actually ruined a training session. It's ruined, the ball is still coming back. It's still the same. The same things you see during a football match. It's the same thing that happens in training. All of a sudden, on the third pass, there's nothing on the ball. It's been kicked back 10 metres or whatever else, and you go again, or it's kicked back to the keeper. And maybe that's one way of doing. Maybe cut out, penalise the pass back to the keeper, or penalise something back in your own half.
Yeah,
but,
just get rid of the back pass.
Yeah, exactly.
For starters,
I have a feeling that probably will. Some of these rules will probably come through for the National League, but we cannot undermine. And Turles spoke strongly on the National League. It's a very, very important competition.
Yeah, that was from last night's show. You can check out that full chat up on our YouTube channel. And Darren O'Toole points out on YouTube, no mention of AB's home province of Connacht, which was a point that Dara is listening way too much to Alan Quinlan. He threatened us before he left the studio that we need to mention the fact that Connacht...
Confident for your boys?
The Connacht are off to for Leinster, I would think so, yeah. I mean, being from Leinster, I am confident for my boys, yeah. Connacht are off to Bordeaux on Saturday, and that is a 3 o'clock start. So that was the... I thumped in the head by Quinny when we're done, so that's that. Nearly time for us to wrap up, Owen, apart from the new segment that we're going to bring your way every week, or in sort of little asterisks. If it works, we'll continue to do it. I mean, there was talk of bringing back the bariometer over the last few weeks.
I wanted to bring back the bariometer.
A lot of people do, Owen, but it's a tremendous item. A lot of people are very impressed with it. Super item, great item. A lot of people very happy with it.
I want to see more bariometer.
So this is, I don't know, what's the item called? What's this item called? Do we have a name for it?
Well, we are going to pick your winners and losers from the week. That tends to happen in sport. There is often plenty of winners and there's often plenty of losers, including on OTB AM.
That is a long name for an item. But,
it's snappy and it's catchy.
So we're going to pick our winners and losers of the week is what's going on, and I'm going to start with my loser of the week, and it is just from that clip that you've seen there in the last couple of minutes, including Declan Bonner on it. It's the hand pass rule in GA. This is some action from the athletic grounds during the week. The 3 hand pass rules specifically, we're following closely here. Sometimes given, sometimes not, between Tyrone and Derry here. A 3-point win for Tyrone. They scored 2 frees, by the way, after hand passing 4 times, having won frees off the back of it. In my view, an impossible job for referees to officiate everything else and count hand passes, which I believe in itself is a full-time gig. And I say, if they're going to press ahead with this, and I mean, by all accounts, there's plenty of reasons not to take the gig out of the referee's hands.
Yeah, I disagree. I think that was a pretty easy one.
It's my loser of the week. I don't care what you do on this.
My loser of the week is they produced this abomination earlier in the week. We are not going to go to that. We are going to go to maybe...
Well, this item is working out tremendously well.
We're going to go to maybe... Let's hear your winner first. Let's hear.
Go for my winner. Are we ready for my winner, Tommy? This is a heavily supported item, so we are good to go with my winner of the week.
I'm the loser of the week.
Is, I mean, that's true. Shay Given is my winner of the week. This is the former Republic of Ireland goalkeeping legend, Shay Given, who's of course coach now at Derby County, and they had their FA Cup third round replay against Southampton during the week. It all went to penalties, of course, in the end. I'm sure you were watching that rather than Theresa May's Brexit speech. So just hold off on those images, but that is, we're straight in with the first one. People were watching this game, they would have seen at the end on, I don't know if you followed it, but Shay Given did a fairly intense session with his goalkeeper right at the end, his Dutch goalkeeper, Roos, and he was going through in his iPad one by one, this is how the penalty takers are going to go, and it was very intense and it all seemed to be going swimmingly well until the actual penalties themselves took place. James Ward-Prowse was first up from a Southampton point of view, and you can see goalkeeper going one way, ball going in the exact opposite way. You can see the sort of theme and the way this is going to go. Next up was the Republic of Ireland international Nathan Redmond. You can just about make up the ball above the oar of the Emirates there. Again, goalkeeper going one way, ball going in the exact opposite direction. Next up is the Southampton centre-half, Yannick Vestergaard. Surely this time, but no. Goalkeeper going one way, ball going the exact opposite way. So far, no good for Shay Given until Matt Targett, of course, steps up. And at that point, surely Shay Given is going to get his way. Now, you could sort of argue here, but again, I mean, for me, that's right down the middle from Matt Targett. It's ball just above the E of the Emirates, and goalkeeper is definitely slowly committing himself in the opposite direction. But then you're wondering, why have I nominated Shay Given as my winner of the week? Well, this is why, because he and, I mean, I think there might be some other people involved with the Derby County coaching staff. Ultimately, it was all successful. Everybody's delighted. Derby County go through, Southampton go out, and Shay Given, you're the winner of the week.
Yeah, congratulations, Shay Given. Commiserations once again. We've kind of had a bit of a lag on this. I think we were just so eager to get to Shay Given again. Is Team Astana, cycling's Team Astana, because they produced a music video and it's terrible.
First ever Pro Cycling Rep 2019. New season is coming soon. This is Astana Pro Team.
No somos solo un equipo, sino una gran familia. I'm Vino. Behind me it's Martino.
Okay, so I think we can actually kill that because we're going to just absolutely harm people who want to go through that. So props to Team Astana for buying into rap culture. They've got it all. They've got the rap signs down. They've got the cool rhymes going on. And of course, some members of their team have got what all good rappers do, and they partake in drug use. Of course, team leader Alexander Vinokurov, who was done for blood doping a couple of years ago, he sees Snoop Dogg smoke weed, and he's like, I'm going to have somebody else's blood in my system. So real rap legends there, Team Astana. Unfortunately, the music doesn't live up to the rap hype, and you are our loser of the week. There he is, Vinokurov on the right-hand side. Our winner of the week this week is Shane Lowry, because he's playing unbelievable golf at the moment, and I'm sure throughout his career he's been in an array of hazards. He's been in the rough, he's been in bunkers, he's been in the water, but I don't think he's quite been in a hazard just like this week. Yes, that is a landfill site, which is something I've never seen before in a golf tournament. This was Wednesday. This is when he shot a course record, and there he is in an insane area of a golf course, something I've never seen before. He was lucky though, because if you look at Thomas Detry, he also landed up in the same area, and his caddy had to pull a spinning machine off his golf ball to actually ensure that he could take the next shot. So congratulations to Shane Lowry, getting himself into a landfill site and still setting a course record. Winner of the week.
Like OB, no? Out of bounds.
I think that was in bounds.
How was a landfill site not out of bounds?
There was some theory that there was a lot of rubbish that was built up to the left of the first tee, and they just didn't clear it because they didn't expect anybody. The fifth tee, they didn't expect anybody to go so far to the left. But clearly, two professional golfers have done so. One just set a course record.
I mean, having heard you out, I'm sticking with my winners and losers of the week. But
well, the hand pass rule is a sleeper of this year. Just wait for the public opinion to change.
This item is definitely coming back. It was such a success this week. There's been a landslide of commentary about it, and people are loving it.
Wow, okay, that's instantaneous reaction for you right there. I'm very proud.
Upcoming today and over the weekend, Brandon Driscoll is going to be in studio later on this afternoon previewing all that rugby that we've been discussing there with the lads. That's upcoming your way a little bit later on. Keep an eye on our social channels for that, and on the radio from 7 o'clock this evening. Friday night racing, of course, as always, Jamie Codd is going to be joining Ger and Johnny in studio a bit later on to discuss a pretty interesting couple of months for him. The Grabby Quiz, of course, is always coming your way on a Friday, and then on Saturday, live from 1 o'clock, it's going to be Premier League all the way in the company of Nathan and crew, and on Sunday it's live commentary with Wasps and Leinster with Conor Morris, Brendan Mackin and Jake Heenan, as we've been telling you, and before all of that it's going to be Huddersfield against Manchester City with Stephen Doyle and Kevin Kilban. That is it for myself and Owen for this morning. Have a good weekend. Good morning, good luck.